Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to take a look inside Panzer Grenadier, the Kokoda campaign. This is a game designed by David Cheever and published by Avalanche Press. Panzer Grenadier is a tactical system that I've never played. And Brian Patterson from the channel, he and I have been talking quite a bit. We've become good friends. And he had heard me talk about never playing Panzer Grenadier. He's actually played this system quite a bit. He's a big fan of it. And, you know, I had said, hey, I've never played it. So he surprised me by sending me a copy of the Kokoda campaign and said, hey, you know what? Give it a shot and see if you like this system and let me know how it goes. So I wanted to shoot a quick video to take a look through what comes with the Kokoda campaign. This is a Ziploc game, so we're just going to dive right into the components. We start off with the scenario book, the 4th edition rules, several player aids, the counter sheets, and the maps. So let's set up the maps and take a closer look at the game. And here's a look at the maps that come with the game. You get 2 cardstock maps. They're very well done. And you can see this is a very, very busy jungle area. You've got a couple of little villages sprinkled throughout the map, but primarily it's going to be jungles, a couple of hills, and then there are some other hilly areas on this other map here. But these are going to be the 2 biggest hills. 40 and 60 are the elevations here. Then you go all the way up to 80, 40, 60, 80, and then 40, 60, 80 on the other side where you get the 2 peaks, and then in between you have the saddle at 60. So it looks like it's going to be real interesting to fight on because, and probably even a little frustrating because you can't see anything. You have to be right on top of each other, just like these guys did in real life. The Australians and the Japanese fought in a very inhospitable area, and it is going to be interesting to see how this plays out in this game. Now we'll take a look at the player aids that come with the game. This is the anti-tank fire table, although I don't think there'll be much need for that in a heavy built-up jungle environment like we see here in Kokoda. On the reverse side, we have the direct fire table with the results explained on the right-hand side and the column modifiers on the bottom. Next, we have the assault chart with the explanation of the results on the right and the column modifiers at the bottom. On the reverse side, we have the bombardment chart with the results explained on the right-hand side and the column modifiers at the bottom. Next, we have the turn record track, which gives all of the turns, including the associated times, the spotting range explanation, and the initiative tracks for either side. Next, we get to the terrain effects chart, which is a fold-out. On the front, we have a listing of the terrain type, movement cost for foot, motorized, mechanized, and whether or not you can entrench. Also, whether you can dig in, effects on spotting, and notes for other effects. On the inside, the terrain effects chart continues, and at the bottom, you have the terrain notes. And on the back, we have the conclusion of the terrain notes. Now we'll take a look at the counters that come with the game. This first little quarter sheet has some administrative counters here, as well as some heavy machine gun units for the Australians. The next sheet is a half sheet of counters of Australian forces. We have some infantry, artillery, and yes, we even do have some armor, so we will be using that armor chart. At the bottom, we have the leaders, and one of the things I found interesting was it says Africa Corps at the top, and the next sheet also says Guadalcanal. So I'm going to assume that with the Panzer Grenadier series, they take counters that are from existing modules and they cross-pollinate them into other modules as needed. On the next sheet, we have the Japanese forces, and it looks like they have the same type of layout as the Australians. They've got infantry, engineers, artillery, a couple of armor units, and then the leaders. And like I said on the last sheet, you see here at the top, it says Guadalcanal. So not only do you have your standard Japanese forces, you also have SNLF and Marines. And I'm wondering if there are going to be some SNLF in this scenario. And on the final sheet, we have the administrative counters. Now we'll take a look at the rules. This is a 41-page rulebook. On the front cover, we have the index listing out all the rules and their associated case numbers, just not the page numbers. Inside of the front cover, we have the introduction, summary of concepts, definitions, so you can understand all the different terms used throughout the rules, the components, an explanation of how to read the counters, different types of units in the game, and then we get into the sequence of play, listing out all the different phases and segments for you. Subordinate activation, Then we get to stacking, all that explained to you. Movement, the different movement types that are available to you. Combat movement, night movement, friendly and enemy units in the same hex, roads, transports, all of that explained to you. Then we get to river crossings, dragging weapons, leaders, leader selection, leader activation, disorientation. And let's stick on disorientation for a second here. That's one of the things I read about with the Kokoda campaign is it is something that some people feel is maybe not the best intro for people into the system because of the disorientation rule and how that throws things off, because it creates a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion, a lot of disorientation on the map. And all of your units may not be able to function as they normally do in a regular scenario. So I'm looking forward to checking that out. They say it may not be the best intro to the system, and this will be my intro to the system, but I am familiar with tactical, and it may be a little frustrating, but it should be interesting to check out. Then we get to movement, combat combining fire, leader effects on morale, commissars, leader casualties, tank leaders, special leaders. Then we get into combat, and this is going to explain all these steps for combat. Unit fire value and range, fire effects, column and dice roll modifiers, step losses, spotting, everyone's favorite thing. How do you spot a unit? Spotting range, limiting terrain, elevation, line of sight, that's everybody's favorite thing when it comes to tactical, is line of sight. It's always a joy, let's say. It's its own interesting game within a game, shall we say. And then we have the train effects chart explaining all the different effects. I believe that is on spotting. Yes, that'll all be just for spotting, line of sight. Bombardment fire, target spotting, offboard artillery, combined fire, procedure, friendly fire, direct fire, block fire. All the different procedures for the different fire types, anti-tank fire, armor efficiency, increased range, special aircraft and anti-tank fire, special foot anti-tank fire, assaults, movement, and then required combat and voluntary combat, opportunity fire and the procedure for that, and restrictions. Morale checks, disruption, demoralization, recovery, surrender. Then we have special unit types, aircraft, armored trains, naval vessels, cavalry, penal units, flamethrowers. Then we have special rules for digging in and strong points, wrecks, entrenchments, entering and exiting the boards, minefields, caves. So it covers a good assortment. Then we have some optional rules here on page 36. Consolidation, drum fire effects, restrictions, efficient unit, moving to fire, excess initiative, fog of war, extended assaults. That continues on. We have quite a bit of optional rules. We even have some covering solo play, limited intelligence, logistic and supply, sector commands, formation commands for multiplayer games, reconnaissance by fire, limited ammunition, smoke effects, dispersal, strategic movement, and then we are at the back of the rule book. Then we get to the scenario book. This is a 58-page book. On the front cover, we have the introduction, and then we have the credits at the bottom. The introduction continues on for a couple pages, explaining to you the Kokoda campaign itself. Then we get to the explanation of the Kokoda campaign game. Special rules that'll be in use in the scenarios. Then we have the introductory game. We have scenario 1, and this is going to be the Trail to Garari, listing out all the units that are going to be in use in the scenario, your special rules, victory conditions, and then the conclusion. Then we have scenario 2, and this is going to be pursuit, same setup as scenario 1. And then scenario 3 will be the defense of Kokoda. And these are all introductory scenarios, so that way, like me, I've never played this system, so that would be a great way for me to start, would be to just get in there, start pushing counters around, and rolling some dice. Then we get to the advanced rules, hidden units and leaders, disorientation, AFVs and other vehicles, delusion. And so that ends right there. So you got a couple of pages of advanced rules. Then we get into the scenarios, which you're going to need these advanced rules with. So you can jump in and get the introductory scenarios under your belt, get a feel for the system, and then move on up to the advanced rules. And the scenarios here are escape from Oivi and counterattack, Then we have the conclusion. So I'm going to guess these are going to be little segments of the overall battle itself, because the next part says Battling Delusion and Isarava and the Trail South. Then we have Isarava Day 1. So that is the scenario. So you're going to have the conclusion here for the first couple scenarios, and then this is going to be for the next segment that they're covering. And Isarava Day 2, Isarava Day 3, Scenario 3, and then the Retreat, which is going to be Scenario 4, and Delaying Tactics Part 1 is going to be Scenario 5, Delaying Tactics Part 2 is going to be Scenario 6, Scenario 7 is Missionary Ridge Day 1, the Missionary Ridge Day 2 is going to be Scenario 8, and then we have the Isarava Battle Game that you can play here. The next, it's going to be on the next sheet. So it breaks, I missed it here as the conclusion. So as each of these different segments, like I was saying with the first one, it is done, you get the conclusion, and then you jump right into the next scenarios. Yorubawa is how I'm going to assume that is said. You have Day 1, Day 2 for the scenarios. And then I think I jumped by a couple pages here. I did. And then we have Day 3, and then the battle game, and then Over the Hills and Far Away. What's the first thing that comes to everybody's mind when you hear that part? Over the Hills and Far Away. Put a little earworm in your head if you start thinking about Sharp's rifles. Scenario 1, the Trail Back. Scenario 3, so I jumped past one somewhere. Oh, there it is, Templeton's Crossing. Scenario 3 is the last day of Templeton's Crossing, then Eora Creek. And then Over the Hills and Far Away Battle Game, End of the Trail. So it's going to be the End of the Trail scenarios. The conclusion, Milne Bay. All the scenarios for that. So quite a bit of scenarios in this game. You've got it all broken down by the different segments of the battle, and then we have the Kokoda campaign game itself. And the game battle, and then winning the campaign, optional campaign game rules, leader characters, all explained to you here. Medals, creating a new leader character, assault skills, skill description, combat skills, leadership points, a lot for the leaders here, so that's kind of interesting. Earning medals, leader character casualties, getting promoted, debtor captured, and then the leader characters and the campaign victory will finish out the scenario book. And that is a look at everything you get inside of the Kokoda campaign. This is a Panzer Grenadier module designed by David Cheever and is published by Avalanche Press. Like I said, I've never played any of the Panzer Grenadier games before, so this is going to be my first. And again, thank you to Brian Patterson for sending this to me. Really appreciate it. I know he's a big fan of it, and he's talked highly of it, and he heard, when we were talking, he heard me say that I had never played. So he's trying to get me hooked on yet another system. It's like I got enough systems to be hooked on, but I'm always open to more, so that's definitely going to be cool. So I'm looking forward to checking this one out because especially the Kokoda campaign is not something that I'm very familiar with. So this will be a great way to learn more about this piece of history by immersing myself into it and experiencing through this game what these men fought at over in World War II, and it's just really going to be an interesting way of learning about it, because that's one of the things that's great about war games is we can learn by doing, obviously in a safe way, but it's going to be a great way to immerse yourself into the history of this battle by playing through it. So who knows, maybe I'll have yet another tactical system that I'm into, but it'll be really cool to check out. I'm looking forward to doing so. Well, I hope that helps you guys out if you'd be curious about this one. You have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.